All right, how's it going, guys? Today we're going to be talking about why psychedelics can be used as a medicine. Now, I personally have partaken in psychedelics, and for me, it has had a lot of beneficial effects. And I feel like psychedelics have been talked about recently a lot. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of studies that have been coming out with psychedelics, and they're coming out that there's a lot of beneficial effects when it comes to psychedelics. And so I kind of just felt like spreading awareness because I feel like psychedelics being blocked off from research and not being able to be used for psychedelic assisted therapy is really causing a lot of harm and a lot of blockage for our society. I feel like psychedelics can really do a lot of healing and can really promote a lot of growth for our society. So now I just want to give a little bit of context in terms of I guess the history and a little bit of science behind psychedelics. And in terms of the history of psychedelics, they have been used for many years. So I'm talking about centuries, millennia, right? Um, there's a lot of evidence showing that I think the earliest evidence we have dates back to potentially 7,000 to 10,000 years ago, and that's just the evidence we have, right? I think it's like rock art in the Sahara that some researchers interpret as psilocybin mushrooms in the figure, and then that's being debated, but there's kind of a hint showing that it could be psychedelics, could be psilocybin mushrooms. But then we do have concrete evidence that dates back a little bit, I think around 5,000 years ago. I'm not sure. But the point is that there's evidence that shows we've been using it for thousands of years. And when it comes to the science that's now coming out, there's also a lot that's coming out recently for it. Kind of said the same thing twice there, but whatever. Um, so the history, right? So why is when I say history, I mean like the current history of psychedelics. Why is psychedelics currently a Schedule 1 drug? Meaning that there can be no research on it, meaning that we can't use it for medicine. Um, and there's this big stigma around psychedelics. Why? Well, it has to do mainly with politics. It's not even a health or a scientific reason to ban these drugs, but it's actually just a political one. And it comes from a negative place, in my opinion, and one that is, like I said, very political and in some ways kind of corrupted. So it has to do with Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon, Richard Nixon basically was, as we know now, a corrupted president because of the Watergate scandal. And he ended up having to resign because people were kind of voting for him to get impeached. But he ended up resigning earlier because he knew he was going to get impeached. So he just did it himself, kind of pulled out the band aid. And um, so basically, he had what history textbooks call the war on drugs. And so that's kind of where it was like the 1970s. You had like the Vietnam War going on. I think civil rights movement were going on as well. But you had a bunch of hippies that were kind of taking these psychedelics, and that was considered counterculture at the time, still is. But this counterculture against the movement, against traditional against traditional structures and traditional systems was kind of being, I guess, attacked, or was starting to. There was a lot of change coming from the hippie culture, basically, and Nixon wasn't a fan of this, and he thought that the psychedelics and the drugs or whatever had to do a big part of this culture and this movement, so he kind of wanted to shut it down in order to keep, I guess, power and to keep the political structure from not changing, from keeping it the same. So he ended up doing this act on basically the drugs that basically banned a lot of drugs, and one of them was psychedelics, and put them in the Schedule 1 of the drugs, which means that there can't be no research and no medicine use for it. Now, in terms of I think the criterias behind a Schedule One drug, I think there's like three of them, but I'm not remembering it right now. But one of them was like lack of safety. Uh, the other one was no beneficial effects, and then I'm forgetting the third one right now. But all three criterias don't even work, right? In terms of lack of safety, psychedelics are extremely safe. Um, they're a lot safer than things like cocaine and morphine, which are actually Schedule Two drugs. So that's kind of dumb, right? And then there's a bunch of also pharmaceutical drugs that these pharmacies are giving out that are way less safer than psychedelics. So huge contradiction there, right? Doesn't make any sense. In terms of no medicinal use, and that's being disproven right now with all the psychedelics that are coming out, with all the, sorry, not psychedelics, but with all the studies that are coming out from psychedelics. And what these studies are showing is that they're a lot more effective than the current medicinal use that we have now. Things like SSRIs, things like, you know, I guess Xanax. Xanax is really the only one I can think of right now. But basically, any like pills that we give nowadays for trying to treat depression and anxiety, they don't work. They work to a certain extent, but based on these studies that are coming out, psychedelics are blowing them out the water. They're almost doubling the percentage of effectiveness that these current drugs that we use now to treat depression and anxiety are doing. And yeah, that's pretty fucking mind blowing. They're also safer and they're less addictive. And I think that was one of the criterias of, you know, of Schedule One drugs, them being potentially addictive. Psychedelics are not at all addictive, right? They're the furthest thing from addiction. Um, and if you've taken psychedelics, you don't. It's not a pleasing thing. Sometimes it can be an uncomfortable trip, and you don't want to be taking that every day, right? So, um, and like I said, cocaine and morphine are clearly super addictive. So it makes no sense. And so, yeah, this stigma that was kind of created by Nixon has kind of stayed and has been, maintained its stigma throughout its years. But finally, I think we're starting to see that break through. And especially with these new clinical trials that are coming out, and these people are basically trying to move it so that we can get that psychedelic assisted therapy that can help so many people like veterans and first responders that can really use it, that go through a lot of trauma in their careers and in their life. And so you know it's clearly wrong in my opinion, and I think, like I said, could this is one of the things that could potentially change society in a dramatic way, in a good way. And I think it's one of the terms of like healing, terms of like tools that we can heal with. I think nature somehow produced this magical and beautiful substance that allowed us to heal, and I don't think that's by coincidence. I think the universe or the cosmos, whatever you want to call it, uh, intended intended the psychedelics for that exact use, for us to be able to heal from it. Um, Again, that's me kind of being optimistic and believing that the cosmos is fundamentally good at its core. But that's a different topic for a different day. Um, what else? And yeah, and then in terms of my personal experience, now for me, psychedelics has personally completely changed my life. It's completely changed me as a person. And, there's many things there's just so much that I can say about how it's changed me. But I'll try my best. I don't want this video to be too long, but I'll try to my best to explain on how it's changed me. And so I'll start off with my first time taking it was when I was around 16, 17. And at the time, I was kind of going through some hard stuff. And, you know, I kind of was just coming from a place of curiosity and just being a teenager and, just wanting to have fun. And so when I did it, I remember being extremely struck and extremely impressed by it. And in the sense that it left a not impressed like, oh wow, this is an amazing drug, but more like, what the heck did I experience? Because I had never experienced anything remotely close to that. My perception was so distorted, the feelings were so insane, and honestly, like, it was such a my perceptions were so distorted that it made me rethink my entire life. It made me rethink, how my perceptions affect my belief and my worldview, and why we think the way we do. What do I believe? Who am I? It kind of led down this self discovery journey. Some would call it a spiritual journey as well. And so, kind of embarked on that. And for the most part, I was really, I was a guy that was just really just, I would just play basketball. I played video games and didn't really care about school. And then when I took it, it was like, whoa. And all of a sudden, I became a nerd. I started to, this curiosity of having to rethink life all over again and kind of questioning my identity and, trying to discover who I truly am, um, led down this path of me becoming sort of a nerd. I started to read. I used to hate reading, but all of a sudden, I just started to read, and I really was trying to understand and get to the bottom of things. And so, I started to like I would always take like regular classes in school, and I started to take like honors classes, AP classes, because I was like, dude, like, am I stupid or am I smart? I don't know. That was one of the things that I questioned my identity. And so I kind of wanted to challenge myself intellectually to see if, what, I don't know, if I was stupid or smart. And so, anyways, it made me extremely curious about life. And through this process of discovery, it's made me learn so much about myself. And so, as I continued to take it, I kept it, I kept going, kind of taking more and taking higher dosages because it felt like there was so much to be explored there that even just taking the same dosage again, I would kind of have these certain reflections and certain insights that I would never have if I didn't take it. And they gave me such deep understanding about my life and myself and how my history and how my childhood kind of led up to the person I was at that time and today, obviously. And so I was like, man, like, what the heck? Like, this is amazing. Um, and so, like I said, yeah, I started to take more and take higher dosages because felt like after all these insights and profound experiences, felt like there was so much there, so much potential. So I just kept kind of, exploring that. And as, now looking back on it, I wasn't really sure what I was exploring, but, kind of tying it in with these studies, these beneficial studies that are coming out that show how positive the effects are for psychedelics. I realized that it helped my mental health and my spiritual health a lot. Um, it helped me heal from certain traumas that I had no idea I had, right? And again, it made me aware of it. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even know I was traumatized by that. I didn't know why I was suppressing my emotions. I had no idea, but it made me aware of it and it made me heal from all of it. I mean, there's probably still more healing I have to do, but it made me heal and do a lot of good inner work on these sort of traumas and things like that. And so, where was I? And so, yeah, like, it made me ultimately it's made me more empathetic and connected to my emotions. Before, I didn't realize, but I wasn't connected to my emotions at all. I was kind of just numb to my emotions. And so when I finally got connected to my emotions, it feels like my experience of life was completely different. And it's been so much more positive and so much, my quality of life has been so much better just based off that. And ultimately, there would be these profound truths from psychedelics, and it's really hard to understand until you experience something like this. And some people experience in different ways. Doesn't have to be psychedelics, but can be just random experiences in life through meditation, or you read a book, or you know, it's many different ways you can experience these deep truths that I think psychedelics reveal, which is which there's a lot, but I would say the ones that I guess can come the I guess the ones that come to my head are that ultimately we are one with the universe. Um, that ultimately we are all interconnected, not separate from each other. Not separate from each other. I don't know if the mic picked that up. And that at our core, we are ultimately love. And in a very, when I say the word love, in a very deep sense, not just romantic or, even just friendship, but in the deepest sense of that word, that I think love's love's ultimate quality is that it dissolves boundaries and it ultimately connects things to each other. It ultimately unites things. It doesn't separate, it unites. And so, in that sense, like there would be these very uh, profound moments that I would have during these trips that showed me that this, it feels like, some people say family is the most important thing. And in some sense, family is love. And it makes you realize not just your not just your family that lives with you or that is, related by blood, but family in the sense that all of humanity is technically your family. And in some deeper sense, your family is also the animals around you. They share the same being as you, and not only that, but the environment, the trees, the plants, they all are your family in a very deep sense, in a very primal way that, like I said, it's really hard to understand sometimes when someone is talking about psychedelics because until you experience it, it can be really hard to really mean or sorry really understand what I mean by those words. And so yeah, for me, because of that kind of, I guess, profound truth or realization, whatever you want to call it, and the healing from the trauma as well, these things ultimately made me a better person. It's made me more compassionate, more empathetic, like I said, more loving, more kind, more grateful, um, more human. What else? And then more present. There's also this weird truth that comes out through psychedelics that it just makes you so present. And I think there is uh, the present moment is just very profound, which is for another topic. But one thing it makes you realize is that life is very finite. There's a common phenomena that happens, which is that this thing of an ego death. So, this ego being like your self image, we tend to attach a lot to our identity, to our ego. And a lot of times those things don't do us a service. Sometimes they do a harm towards us. And so it really, sometimes, and for me, it's happened a lot where you kind of experience what it's like to let go of those things and then to really experience what you truly are or who you truly are. Excuse me. um, without any sort of attachments. And that's where kind of all the profound experience and realizations come from. Um, and so I think when you realize life is so finite and this, ego death, and makes you kind of, it made me at least reflect a lot on death. And um, when you really realize how soon, and I know it's kind of like I guess a hard truth for some people, but death is very imminent, or it's very close, and because life is so short. And I think as kind of Steve Jobs that said this in his speech, in his Stanford commencement speech, and death being so death can be used as a tool to make you more basically urgent and present. He just said death can be used as a tool part, but I'm kind of adding the latter part to it. And this this is kind of what the shrooms, or I mean, that's kind of the psychedelics, because it just wasn't psilocybin, but the psychedelics overall made me realize that, and so therefore that's kind of what has helped me become more present, and a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of connections as well between the meditation state and psychedelics as well. And another thing that I've benefited from, it's kind of added to my spiritual life. I feel like um, I never had a spiritual life before, and I guess we all do. I think we are spiritual beings experience. I think we are spiritual beings experiencing human a human life. And so I guess I've always had it, but I was never really aware of it or connected to it. But it really opened, and it really allowed me to connect to this part of my life that I was neglecting or not connected to. And I feel like that spiritual aspect of life makes life so much better. And like so much better. And so I can't really imagine how I was living life before. Um, in the sense that, I'm so grateful that I'm now connected to that part of myself. So, um, yeah, overall, and another thing that it kind of added in my life was kind of having a spiritual practice, uh, like a daily spiritual practice, things like meditation or prayer, because what you kind of learn from it is that, okay, this kind of experience and these kind of benefits that you get from psilocybin, you can actually do with daily practices. Now, I think it's a lot more gradual in terms of the growth, because sometimes I feel like with psychedelics, it's sometimes you can transform a lot or grow a lot, because it can be a lot at once, because you're kind of playing with fire. So, whereas these spiritual practices on a daily basis kind of is like maintenance, recalibration, and, you know, kind of growing on a small scale, but in a healthy way. So, it kind of added that for me as well. And so, yeah, that was kind of my personal experience and the personal benefits that I gotten from psychedelics. And that's kind of, like I said, why I feel like I need to share this information, because there is a lot of stigma, besides even the Richard Nixon whole scandal thing and him putting the psychedelics in Schedule 1. I feel like there's a lot of stigma behind psychedelics. And because, I'll hear a lot of people say kind of negative stories about it, and a lot of people get scared of it because they have a bad trip or whatever it is. But a lot of times that's for a lot of different factors, right? I think a lot of people take it recreationally, and that's all good and fun. I think there's certain times where you can do that. But a lot of times these negative stories that you hear about psychedelics, they don't really know what they're doing at all, right? Meaning that they don't know the amount of dosage they're taking, the setting, where they're taking it is somewhere where they're not comfortable at all, and it's like this new place. It'll be like at a festival, or many times as well, it's with random people that they just met or something or have never met before. Um, and so, like, that's obviously going to cause you a bad trip. And if you're not also educated, or if you're not coming at it with the right mindset, that can also affect you as well. And then as well, if you're prone to like psychosis, this can also like, they don't advocate for people with um, what's the word, with if your family has basically if your family has psychosis, then they advise you not to take psychedelics, because that can kind of um, spark some psychosis within you if you have family that has psychosis. But yeah, so um, obviously these people are going to have bad trips if they're not taking it the right way, because the setting matters a lot. You have to be safe, you have to be comfortable, you have to know the dosage you're taking, you have to have the right intentions, the right mindset. It's a very kind of ritual thing, um, if you want to get those therapeutic positive effects from it. But I feel like it is a very strong medicine, and it's a very strong substance that if you're playing around with it and you don't really know what you're doing, it could potentially cause fear and some a little bit of trauma, because you're like, what the heck, like what was that? I'm staying away from that thing. Um, but I think that's why you hear all these bad stories about it. But if people were to do it the appropriate way, then I think you would hear a lot more positive stories about it, and you would see a lot more people benefiting from it. And let me see if I had anything else to say. And yeah, I mean, that's really my personal experience with it. And so it's really been a big part of my journey. I feel like you know, I have no regrets about it. I'm very grateful that it was able to, find it at the time that I did, and that it was able to heal me and change me in the ways that it did. And so, I'm forever grateful for psychedelics. And my hope is that hopefully in the future we can get more access as a society to psychedelics, to have things like psychedelic assisted therapy, um, with MDMA or psilocybin, or, whatever, ketamine. They all have kind of similar effects. With society right now, we see this big mental health epidemic. And, I've said this in my previous videos, but basically we are materialistically rich, but spiritually lacking. And I think having psychedelics banned and as a Schedule 1 drug is a part of this mental health epidemic and this spiritual scarcity that we're seeing. And so, if we're allowed access to this medicine again, and we do it in the appropriate way, we do it regulated, I think we can start to really help and really transform dramatically this spiritual scarcity and this mental health epidemic that we're seeing, with all this anxiety, depression, isolation, um, all these things, suicide rates. I feel like all those things would get dramatically better if psychedelics were allowed to be used in our society again. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my thoughts on it and my personal experience, I guess my story with it. And so, I hope you guys really maybe learn something new or change your perspective on psychedelics. And, if you do try it, I would advise to do it with a, supervised, and do it in the appropriate way. And there's a lot of research out there that can inform you on how to do it the appropriate way. And yeah, so yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed this. Gonna be trying to make more videos, like, they might be long ass videos, but just trying to be more authentic with my videos, and less, scripted and tight with it. So yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys thought about this video, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.